The stars had watched humanity for a very long time, and so had others who lived among them. The collective of 12 was an alliance of alien species that had ruled 3 spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy for over 50,000 years, and they considered themselves the rightful masters of all intelligent life. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and brought thousands of species under their control, and they did this not through cruelty but through overwhelming power and the simple logic that resistance was pointless. When their long-range sensors first detected radio signals from a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, they marked it for observation and waited. 200 years passed. In that time, they watched humanity crawl out of their home world and establish small colonies on the red planet they called Mars and the frozen moon they named Europa. The collective found this amusing in the way that adults find the ambitions of small children amusing. These humans were primitive and violent and spent most of their energy fighting among themselves over resources and ideas and borders that meant nothing in the grand scale of the universe. The War Council of the collective met in their great chamber on the capital world of Sirith Prime, and they discussed what to do about the humans. They are expanding faster than predicted, said Admiral Cathara, who commanded the expeditionary fleets. At their current rate, they will reach the outer boundaries of collective space within 300 years. Then we must bring them into the fold now, said Ambassador Vethner of the Crithani Dominion, and his iridescent scales shimmered with confidence. Before they become a nuisance, the council agreed, and they sent Vethner to deliver their terms. His ship emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of the human moon, and he broadcast his intention to speak with their leaders. The humans responded with confusion and then excitement, and then something that Vethner interpreted as fear. He was wrong about that last part. The United Nations General Assembly gathered in their great hall in the city called New York, and Vethner materialized before them as a holographic projection, and he stood 12 ft tall with scales that shifted from blue to golden, eyes that held the weight of conquered worlds. People of Earth, he began, and his translator rendered his words in every human language simultaneously. I am Ambassador Vethner of the Crithani Dominion, and I speak for the collective of 12. The humans stared at him in silence, and he took this as appropriate reverence. Your species has been observed for 200 of your years, and we have determined that you are ready to join the greater galactic community, he continued. But you must understand your place within it. He outlined the terms with the casual confidence of someone who had delivered this speech 100 times before. Humanity would surrender all territorial claims beyond their moon, and they would submit to collective oversight in matters of technology and expansion, and they would provide annual tribute in the form of mineral resources from their asteroid belt. They had 30 standard rotations to comply. This is not negotiable, Vethner said. Collective has conquered 1,000 worlds, and we have never been defeated, and resistance will only bring suffering to your people. He paused and allowed what he believed was mercy to enter his voice. Accept these terms and you will be protected, and you will have access to technologies beyond your imagination, and your children will grow up as citizens of a galactic civilization rather than primitive scratching At the dirt of a single world. Secretary, General Amara Okanku stood at the podium, and she was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen humanity through 3 major crises. She did not look afraid. Ambassador, she said, and her voice was calm and measured. You say you have watched us for 200 years. That is correct. Then you have seen our wars. Vithner made a gesture that his species used to indicate acknowledgement. We have, and this is why we offer you protection and guidance and the peace that comes from accepting your proper place. Okanku smiled, and it was a thin and tired expression that meant something very different from what the ambassador assumed. We will need to discuss this among ourselves, she said. 30 days is a short time for such a significant decision. It is more than sufficient, Vithner replied. Most species require only hours to recognize the wisdom of cooperation. He ended the transmission, and his ship departed from them, the solar system, and he sent his report to the War Council with complete confidence in the outcome. The humans would submit as all species did, and the collective would gain another tributary world, and life would continue as in hand for 50,000 years. What Vithner did not see was what happened in the hours after his departure. Secretary General Okanku called an emergency session of every major world leader, and she did not waste time on formalities. They think we are weak, she said. Snorts. They think our divisions make us easy to control, and they think our wars prove that we cannot stand together. Do we have any chance against them? Asked the president of the European Federation. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, perhaps. O'Connell replied, but that is not the right question, and the right question is whether we are willing to try. The room fell silent, and in that silence, something ancient stirred in the hearts of every person present. It was the same thing that had driven their ancestors to cross oceans and climb mountains and walk on the surface of the moon. It was the refusal to kneel. We have 30 days, O'Connell continued, and I suggest we use them wisely. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had agreed to full cooperation. And within 12 hours, the largest industrial mobilization in human history had begun. Factories that built cars began building ship components, and universities that competed for prestige began sharing research openly, and soldiers who had trained to fight each other began training to fight together. The collective's observation satellites noted increased activity on Earth and Luna and Mars, but they did not understand what they were seeing. They had watched humanity fight for 2 centuries, but they had never seen humanity unite, and they had no idea what that meant. On Kirith Prime, the War Council celebrated another successful acquisition, and Ambassador Vethner received commendations for his diplomatic work. None of them understood that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of their civilization. They had given humanity a common enemy, and humanity had 30 days to prepare. The collective of 12 had studied humanity with great care, and they believed they understood everything important about this young species. They knew that humans live short lives of approximately 80 years, and they knew that humans spent much of that time fighting among themselves. They had recorded every major conflict from the great wars of the 20th century to the smaller battles. That continued even as humanity reached for the stars. From this data they drew a simple conclusion. Humans were violent and divided and incapable of sustained cooperation. And, when faced with overwhelming force, they would fracture along their existing fault lines and turn on each other. This conclusion was completely wrong. The collective had watched humanity the way a scientist watches bacteria through a microscope, and they had cataloged behaviors without understanding motivations. They saw competition and assumed weakness. They saw conflict and assumed chaos. They never considered that competition might be a form of training and that conflict might forge strength rather than destroy it. On Earth, the 30 days passed with terrifying speed, and humanity worked like they had never worked before in the factories of Germany. In China and Brazil, machines ran without stopping, and workers rotated in shifts so the production never slowed. And designs that would have taken years to develop were completed in days, because every engineer on the planet was sharing their work in the shipyards of Luna, the great construction platforms that had been building cargo vessels switched to military production overnight, and the first human warships began to take shape under the light of the distant sun. These ships were not elegant, and they were not beautiful, and compared to collective vessels they were crude and primitive. But they were functional, and they were numerous, and most importantly, they were improving with every single day. A collective ship took 2 years to build because their engineers followed established designs that have been perfected over centuries. A human ship took 2 weeks because human engineers treated every problem as a puzzle to be solved right now. Admiral Cathar received regular reports from the observation posts, and she noted the increased activity with mild interest. They are building military vessels, her aide informed her. Current estimates suggest they will have approximately 2,000 ships by the deadline. Cathar made a dismissive gesture. 2,000 primitive vessels against 300 of ours. And the mathematics are not in their favor. They are also constructing something in the asteroid belt, the aide continued. Our sensors cannot determine its purpose. Mining equipment most likely, Cathar replied. They are trying to gather resources for tribute, and this is a good sign of their acceptance. She did not order a closer investigation because she did not believe it was necessary. This was her first mistake on Earth. Secretary General Okonkwo met daily with the unified command structure that humanity had created in record time. Admiral Chun Wei of the Pacific Fleet had been appointed overall military commander, and he was an older man with gray hair and a calm demeanor that masked a brilliant tactical mind. We cannot match them in direct combat, he said during one of these meetings. Their weapons are more powerful, and their ships are faster, and their shields can withstand anything we can throw at them. Then we do not fight them directly, Okonkwo replied. What are our other options? Chun smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We have been studying their technology through the signals their ambassador broadcast, and we have found something interesting. He pulled up a technical display that showed the energy signatures of collective vessels. Their ships rely on a centralized power distribution system, and everything runs through a single main reactor, and If that reactor is disrupted, the entire ship goes dark. Can we disrupt it? Asked General Morrison of the European Defense Force. Theoretically, yes. Chen said. Our scientists have been working on an electromagnetic pulse weapon for decades, and we never deployed it because it was too dangerous and too indiscriminate, and it would have destroyed our own electronics as easily as any enemy. But collective electronics are different, Okonkwo said, and understanding dawned in her eyes. Exactly. Chen confirmed. Their systems operate on frequencies that our weapons can target specifically, and we can build devices that will disable their ships without affecting our own. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. How long do we need? Okonkwo asked. We have prototypes already, Chen replied. Mass production will take 2 weeks, and deployment will take another week after that. That gives us 1 week of margin, Morrison calculated. It is not much. Then we make sure everything goes according to plan. On day 28, a small human delegation arrived at the collective border station, and they requested a meeting with Admiral Cathara. She granted them an audience because protocol demanded it, and because she expected them to beg for an extension of the deadline. The human envoys were 3 mid-level diplomats, and they presented their request with appropriate humility. Our governments need more time to coordinate the tribute collection, they explained. The logistics are more complex than we anticipated. Cathara denied their request immediately. The deadline stands, she said. The collective does not negotiate, and you will comply or you will face the consequences. The human diplomats nodded and thanked her for her time, and they departed without argument. Cathara reported this interaction to the War Council as evidence that humanity was already accepting their fate. She did not notice the way the human envoys had smiled as they left her chamber. She did not wonder why they had seemed so calm in the face of her rejection, and she did not realize that their entire visit had been a deception designed to gather intelligence about collective ship configurations. The deadline was now 3 days away. Humanity was ready. The collective had no idea what was coming. In the great shipyards of Luna, the final warships received their weapons and crews, and they joined a fleet that had assembled in the shadow of Jupiter. 2,300 human vessels waited in the darkness of space, and among them were 12 specialized ships that carried the electromagnetic pulse weapons that would change everything. Admiral Chen reviewed the final battle plans with his command staff, and when he was satisfied, he sent a single message to Earth. We are ready. Secretary General Okonkwo received this message, and she allowed herself 1 moment of fear and 1 moment of doubt, and then she pushed those feelings aside. Humanity had spent its entire existence preparing for this moment, even if they had not known it. Every war and every conflict and every competition had been training for the day when they would face a true external threat. The collective thought they understood. Humans, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The collective pacification fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel on day 31, and the void of space filled with 300 warships that represented more firepower than humanity had ever imagined. Admiral Cathara stood on the bridge of her flagship, and she surveyed the human solar system with the confidence of a predator entering a cage of prey. Her ships were magnificent vessels of gleaming metal and advanced technology, and each one could glass a continent in hours, and together they could reduce Earth to a lifeless rock. This was standard procedure for species that required encouragement to accept collective rule. She expected, though, humans to send a surrender transmission within hours, and she expected to be back in collective space within a week, and she expected commendations and perhaps a promotion for another successful pacification. What she found instead was silence. Her sensors detected human ships scattered throughout the system, and there were thousands of them clustered near the gas giant called Jupiter and near the asteroid belt and in orbit around every inhabited world. But they were not advancing, and they were not fleeing, and they were not doing anything at all. They were simply waiting. Open a channel to the human fleet, Cathara commanded. Demand their immediate surrender. Her communications officer complied, and after a moment, human face appeared on the main view screen. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes, and he wore what appeared to be a formal military uniform of some kind. This is Fleet Admiral Chen Wei of the United Human Defense Force, he said. I assume you are Admiral Cathar. You know my name, Cathar replied, and she allowed a hint of satisfaction into her voice. Good, and this means you understand who you are dealing with. We do, Chen said, and his voice held no fear at all. The question is whether you understand who you are dealing with. Cathar made a gesture of dismissal. You are outmatched, and your vessels are primitive compared to ours, and you cannot hope to survive direct combat with the collective fleet. You are correct, Chen acknowledged. In direct combat we would lose. Then surrender now and spare your people unnecessary suffering. Chen smiled, and it was the smile of someone who knew something that his enemy did not. Admiral, he said, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen very carefully, because your life and the lives of everyone in your fleet depend on understanding what I'm about to say. Cathar felt a strange sensation that she did not immediately recognize as uncertainty. Speak then. In exactly 4 minutes, every ship in your fleet is going to lose primary power, and you will not be destroyed, but you will be disabled, and you will be dead in space with no weapons and no engines and no shields. Cathar laughed, and the sound echoed across her bridge. This is your strategy, and you think psychological warfare will work against the collective. It is not psychological warfare, Chen replied, and his voice remained perfectly calm. It is a courtesy, and I am giving you 4 minutes to prepare your crews for what is about to happen, because we do not want unnecessary casualties. You are bluffing. I am not. The channel remained open, and the seconds ticked away, and Cathara watched the human admiral with growing irritation. 3 minutes passed, 2 minutes passed, 1 minute passed. Your time has expired, Cathara said, and nothing has happened, and now you will see what happens to species that. The lights on her bridge flickered, then they died. Emergency systems activated, and red warning lights filled the darkness, and alarms screamed from every station, and Cathara felt her ship shudder as every major system shut down simultaneously. Report, she shouted. What is happening? Primary reactor offline, her engineering officer called out, and panic filled his voice. Secondary systems failing, and Shields down and weapons down and engines down. And we have emergency power only. Cathara stared at her view screen in horror as she watched the same thing happen to every ship in her fleet. One by one the great warships of the collective went dark and they drifted helplessly in the void like dead things, and in less than 60 seconds, the most powerful military force ever assembled against humanity became 300 floating coffins. The human admiral appeared on her emergency display and he looked exactly as calm as he had before. You have approximately 20 minutes of life support remaining, Chum said. This is enough time for your crews to reach escape pods if you choose to abandon ship. How? Cathara whispered in her voice, cracked with disbelief. How is this possible? You studied us for 200 years. Chum replied. But you only watched our public technology and our broadcasts and our networks, and you never asked what we kept hidden, and you never wondered why a species that fights constantly among itself never managed to destroy itself. He paused and let the silence stretch. We have been preparing for this moment for a very long time, Admiral, and we just never knew who the enemy would be. Cathara understood then what she was facing, and the realization filled her with a terror she had never experienced in her entire career. The humans had not been weak and divided as the collective believed. They had been training. Every war had taught them new tactics, and every conflict had driven new innovations, and every competition had pushed them to be stronger and faster and smarter than before. And when a true external threat appeared, they had united with a speed and ferocity that the collective could not have imagined. What do you want? Cathara asked. Surrender, Chum said. Order your crews to stand down, and we will tow your ships to safety, and we will provide food and medical care, and when this is over, we will return you to collective space unharmed. Why would you show us mercy? Chun considered the question for a moment. Because we are not conquerors, he said. We did not ask for this war, and we did not want an empire, and we only want to be left alone to live our lives as we choose. He leaned forward, and his eyes held something that Cathara could not identify. But make no mistake, Admiral, and if you force us to fight, we will fight, and we will not stop until we have won. And history has taught us that lesson. Very well. Cathara looked at her darkened bridge and her helpless fleet and the thousands of crew members who were counting on her to keep them alive. She had no choice. I surrender, she said, and the words tasted like ash in her mouth. The collective expeditionary fleet surrenders to the United Human Defense Force. Chun nodded, and there was no triumph in his expression, and no gloating, and only a grim satisfaction. Smart choice, Admiral, and we will begin rescue operations immediately. The channel closed, and Cathara sat in the darkness of her ruined flagship, and she thought about the report she would have to send to the War Council. She had been defeated without firing a single shot, and she knew with terrible certainty that the collective would not accept this humiliation. The war was just beginning. The War Council of the collective received Admiral Cathara's distress signal 18 hours after the battle, and the message spread through their summarization like a disease. 300 warships disabled without a single shot. Fired. The entire expeditionary fleet captured by primitives. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. Ambassador Rithnar demanded immediate action, and his Scales flushed dark with fury as he addressed the council. This can't stand, he declared. The humans have humiliated us before the entire galaxy. And if we do not respond with overwhelming force, every tributary species will see this as weakness. Strategos Cavil was the supreme military commander of the collective, and he had won 17 major wars over his long career, and he did not share the ambassador's confidence. Before we commit to another attack, we must understand what happened, he said. I have reviewed the sensor data from Cathara's fleet, and what I see concerns me greatly. He activated a holographic display that showed the human weapon in action. This device targets the specific frequency of our power distribution systems, and it creates a cascade failure that disables every major system simultaneously, and our ships were helpless in seconds. Then we modify our systems, Bethanar said dismissively. We change the frequencies and their weapon becomes useless. That will take time, Kegel replied, months at minimum, and years more likely, and in that time, the humans will continue to develop new weapons. He pulled up another display that showed human industrial output over the 30 days before the battle. This is what truly concerns me, and in 1 month they built over 2,000 warships from nothing, and their production increased every single day as they learned and adapted and improved their methods. The council studied the numbers in silence. Their individual ships are inferior to ours, Kegel continued, but they build them 10 times faster, and they modify their designs constantly, and the ships they fielded at the end of the month were measurably superior to the ships they built at the beginning. What are you suggesting? Asked Counselor Thuron of the Valora Union. That we abandon our claim to their system. I am suggesting that we understand what we are facing, Kegel replied. Most species reach technological equilibrium, and they find designs that work, and they refine them slowly over centuries. And this is how we have operated for 50,000 years, he gestured at the human data. Humans do not work this way, and they treat every problem as a challenge to be overcome immediately, and they compete with each other constantly, and this competition drives innovation that speeds we cannot match. The council fell silent, and for the first time doubt crept into their hearts. We have two options, Cable said. We can commit the Grand Fleet and destroy humanity utterly, or we can find another solution. What other solution? Bethner demanded. They attacked us, and they humiliated us, and they must be punished. They defended themselves, Cable corrected, against an invasion that we initiated, and they showed mercy to our captured crews when they could have killed them all. Mercy is weakness, is it? Cable asked. They have our ships and our technology and our people, and they returned all three without demanding anything in exchange. And what does that tell you about their character? The debate continued for hours, and in the end the war faction won. The Grand Fleet would be assembled, and humanity would be destroyed. It took 3 months to gather the forces, and in that time the collective pulled ships from every sector and mobilized every available soldier and constructed the largest military force in their history. 12,000 warships, 50 million soldiers, enough firepower to sterilize 100 worlds. When they arrived in the human solar system, they expected to find the primitives Cowering in fear, instead they found Fleet Admiral Chun waiting with another message. "Welcome back," he said, and his voice held the same calm confidence as before. "I assume you are here to negotiate." Grand Admiral Venter commanded the fleet, and he was the most decorated officer in collective history, and he had never lost a battle. "We are here to end you," he replied. "Your tricks will not work twice, and we have modified our systems, and your weapon is useless now. I assumed you would," Chun said. "That is why we built new ones." Venter felt a flicker of uncertainty, but he pushed it aside. "You cannot possibly have developed new weapons in 3 months. Can we not?" Chun smiled. "You still do not understand this, Admiral, and in 3 months we have done things that would take your engineers 3 decades. He transmitted a data package to the collective fleet. "These are our terms, and you can accept them or you can fight us, and the choice is yours." Venter reviewed the terms, and he found them surprisingly reasonable. Humanity wanted recognition as an equal sovereign state, and open trade relations and nothing more. No tribute and no territory and no revenge for the attempted conquest. "Why?" Venter asked. "You could demand far more than this." "Because we do not want an empire," Chun replied. "We want to live in peace and trade with our neighbors and explore the galaxy, and we have no interest in ruling over others. And if we refuse, then we fight, and many will die on both sides, and eventually one of us will win, and we believe it will be us, but we would rather not find out." Chun leaned forward. "Admiral, I'm going to be honest with you, and we do not know if we can win this war, and your fleet is larger than anything we have ever faced, and your technology is still superior to ours in many ways. Then why should we accept your terms? Because you do not know if you can win either," Chun said, "and the cost of finding out will be catastrophic for both our peoples." He paused. "You have studied us for 200 years, and you know how we fight, and you know that we do not surrender, and you know that we will make you pay for every inch of space you take from us." Venter looked at the human fleet arrayed before him, and he saw 2,000 ships that had been built in 30 days, and he wondered what else they had built in the 3 months since. His sensors showed nothing obvious, and no hidden weapons platforms, and no secret fleets waiting in ambush, but that was exactly what worried him. The humans. Clear's throat had surprised them once, and they could do it again. "I must consult with the War Council," he said. "Finally." "Take your time," Chin replied. "We are not going anywhere." The communication ended, and Venter sat alone on his bridge, and he thought about everything he had learned. The humans were not what the collective had believed they were. Not weak, and they were not primitive. And they were not divided. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors, and they had spent their entire existence preparing for exactly this kind of fight. Venter made his decision, and he transmitted his recommendation to the War Council. 3 days later, the Grand Fleet withdrew from human space. The war was over. The Treaty of Ganymede was signed 6 months after the Grand Fleet withdrew from human space, and representatives from all 12 member species of the collective gathered on the frozen moon to formalize the peace ambassador. Vevinar had been forced to lead the collective delegation, and this was widely understood as a punishment for his role. In starting the war, he stood across from Secretary General Amara O'Connell, and he tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The terms are acceptable, he said, and he signed the documents that recognized humanity as an equal sovereign state with full trading rights throughout collective space. O'Connell signed as well, and when the ceremony was complete, she invited Vathna to share a drink in private. He accepted because he had questions that he needed answered. They sat in a small observation room that looked out over the gas giant Jupiter and its swirling storms of orange and brown, and O'Connell poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. "This is called whiskey," she said. "It is one of our oldest traditions, and we share it with friends to celebrate important moments." "Are we friends?" Vathna asked. "We could be." He tasted the drink and found it surprisingly pleasant, with a warmth that spread through his body. "I do not understand you," he admitted. "Your species, I mean, and everything we believed about you was wrong." "What did you believe?" "That you were weak because you fought among yourselves, and that you were primitive because your technology was young, and that you would submit because every other species has submitted." O'Connell smiled, and it was the same thin, tired expression she had worn in the General Assembly when this all began. "Our fighting makes you strong," she said. "Every conflict teaches us something new, and every war forces us to adapt and innovate, and every competition pushes us to be better than we were before. But so much suffering and so much death, and was it worth it?" "No," O'Connell replied. "War is never worth it, and we know this better than anyone because we have experienced it more than any species in the galaxy." She looked out at Jupiter, and her eyes held memories of conflicts that Vathna would never understand. "But we have also learned something else, and we learned that the only thing worse than fighting is surrendering to those who would take away our freedom. You could have demanded more from us," Bethaner said, "tribute or territory or